Hello everybody and welcome back to another new vlog. Thank you for joining me once again. Yes, again on another woodland path, which is quite interesting. And it's another situation where I've come here by accident really. I entered the park just about half a mile away from here, and as I was walking up the main road to the park, a lady came past on a mobility scooter and said good morning to me and carried on up the road into the park. When I got into the park, I noticed that she was trying to get through a kissing gate. Not really a kissing gate, a gate in the path, and she couldn't open the gate and get her mobility scooter through at the same time. So I caught up with her, opened the gate and let her through and closed the gate behind me. And as I turned around, she said to me, where are you going now? And I get the impression that she wanted me to walk with her all the way to make sure that somebody was there to open the gates for her whenever she got to another gate in the future. I thought, I'm not wasting all of my morning walking around with her just to open gates for her. I tried to do the decent thing and open one for her so she could get into the park and have a look around, but obviously I had to try and find a way of getting away from her. So I've cut into a little woodland near to where we were, said goodbye to her and headed off up the path, and I found myself here in this little spot. I'm kind of glad I did that actually, because I found this little spot here and I'm looking at this tree behind me. Well, two trees. I think they're quite interesting. The first one here on the left, as you look at it, kind of has all these branches and limbs sticking out towards the left, kind of pointing the direction of the pathway which leads over in that direction somewhere. But then there's that one straight up right next to it, almost as if it's somebody that wants to know the way, it needs directions, and this tree here is showing them exactly what the directions are. So that's quite an interesting one. It's got its own story, somebody looking for directions and somebody telling them what the directions are. So I'm going to stop here and take this photo, and then I'm going to follow that path myself. Now, I have walked along this path once or twice before, but never really spotted anything particularly interesting that I wanted to photograph. So that first photograph of the day really shows the benefit of revisiting the same places regularly, because you're always going to find something a little bit new and different that you haven't spotted before. And I think that's a really interesting lesson to learn for all of us. I'm heading now down this path to see if I can find another composition that I spotted about 10 or 11 days ago, and it's another one that I've never actually walked past before and never noticed, and I spotted it then and thought that maybe it'd be a good idea to come back and get that image at some point. So if I get to it, I'll take that shot as well. I'm heading down there now anyway, so I think I should be able to find it. So hopefully the next shot will be one that I spotted a couple of weeks ago. So this is very interesting. About 10 or 11 days ago, I walked down this path behind me, and as I walked through the little cutting just here through the path, I stopped and realised there was a shot just there, literally about 25 to 30 yards behind me. There were two shots, in fact, one looking back the opposite direction and one looking in this direction. And I took them both because they were shots I hadn't seen before. And then I cut through, carried on along this path here and cut through here. And just here, as I got towards the main path, which is just there, I noticed this tree here, which is all gnarly and twisted and beautiful. So at that point, the light wasn't quite right and the sunshine wasn't quite right to be able to get a decent shot of this. But right now, I think that looks perfect. And a few days further on now, we've started to lose a few more of the leaves, so there's a little bit more of that light coming through because there's less of the tree canopy now. Not very much, but it's enough that it makes the image now. So I'm going to stop here and take this one. A little more info for you about those first two shots of the day. The very first one, it's a shot that a spot that I've walked past several times before. I've never really paid that much attention to it, and I think as I've evolved and matured as a photographer, it's something that I've started to look at more and more, and something that's become more and more obvious. I've started to learn, I think, about understanding how to look at things and how to find compositions just by seeing what's around you, and taking the time to actually look and think about it. But the second shot is one that I spotted, like I say, about 10 or 11 days ago on a previous walk. And again, it's one that I'd never ever walked past before, and it just happened to be there previously, and I thought that might look good at certain times of the year. It's one that I know where it is now, and I can revisit again in the future, just to see if there's a better image of that, a better composition at different times of the year. And that's kind of interesting. But also, in between those two shots, I mentioned to you that I'd been walking through a woodland that I'd walked through before and not really paid that much attention to it, and I kind of went through there by accident because of trying to get away from a lady who appeared to want my help all morning. So I walked through that woodland and came out onto the path roughly about in the area where I'd been walking 10 or 11 days ago, and joined up with the same path again, and then walked through that little cut-in where I'd taken the two shots previously, and then back to the spot where I'd spotted a new composition 10 or 11 days ago. During that little bit of space in between the two compositions that I've taken today, I spotted another composition which at the time I thought looked great, but there was way too much light on it because of the sunlight. And I've decided that it's probably something that I can come back to at a later date, or maybe even later today on my way back, to see if I can capture that shot in slightly different light. So it's an interesting one. I don't know if I'll definitely go back today. If I do, I'll let you know. But I'm glad I went that way, to be quite honest with you. And like I say, it was just something that I did by accident, and decided I was going to kind of follow this route today instead. So that's always something to remember. Always make sure that when you're out exploring, you're thinking about what you're looking for, but also thinking about different options to go back and revisit spots where you've been before as well. I've walked about a mile from where I last was when I last spoke to you, and the main reason I haven't stopped and vlogged anything is because I haven't found any compositions yet that I think are interesting enough to photograph. However, I have spotted a couple of locations along that route where there may be one or two compositions that I can come back to, and these are things that I'm mentally flagging, so things that I'm kind of keeping in my mind for future reference, and then I can come back to them when I think the lighting is right and when I think the time of year is right to capture those images. And I'm really pleased with that, because that means that at least I know that there are going to be some more images in that area in the future, so it's worth another revisit at another time. I think that's been the main theme of today's vlog. I didn't think that was going to be, but obviously it is. So I think I'm coming to a spot now where there may be some more compositions, where I know there are likely to be more compositions, and I'll have a look out for them. But for now, I'm just going to move on and see if I can find the next one. So that shot that I mentioned earlier, that I said I might go back to, I think that's probably going to have to wait now until another time, a different walk, because behind me I've got an absolutely beautiful scene. You'll notice these silver birch trees here, and there's kind of a gap in between them, and then you've got almost a path running through the middle of there that you can't really see because it's surrounded and overgrown with all of these ferns. Those ferns obviously have started to turn a little bit yellow now as we are in early autumn, and because they're changing colours, you've got quite a lot of vibrancy going through the greens and yellows, and even a few oranges that are dappled into there as well. And then you've got these beautiful silver birch trees that I mentioned that kind of frame the image and draw your eye into the image as well. So I'm kind of glad that I stopped here and decided to come this way instead of going back the way I'd already started this morning. But there's also an interesting bit of cloud cover behind those silver birch trees, and it's a bit overcast and giving a very slightly misty effect, although it doesn't look very misty to the eye. As you look through the camera and take the image, it's kind of misted it up a little bit. which is quite interesting. So I've shot that at f/16 because I want to try and get as much of that in focus as possible, and also ISO 100, and I think it's about a 15th or a 30th of a second. So I hope you like that image as well. I mentioned earlier with the previous shot that was nothing says autumn like that particular shot, but this scene is even better to explain autumn to you and define it really. You've got these beautiful trees that stand up nice and tall and straight in the woodland. There's not very much light, although there is some light dappling through the trees at the top, but you've still got quite a lot of green foliage on the trees themselves, and then on the floor you'll see all these beautiful orangey brown leaves that have already fallen, partly because it's early autumn and partly because some of those leaves are left over from previous autumnal seasons where the leaves have fallen off previously and they've never really had a chance to be cleared away and decompose because there's not enough light getting through to them to do that. So you end up with this very, very reddish brown looking floor for most of the year, to be quite honest, in this area. But often it's too dark because the tree canopy is too thick and too overgrown to take a photo in here. But now, as you enter into the start of autumn, you start to see those colours more and more because there's slightly more light coming through the tops of the trees. So this is what I'm going to set up a composition here. Like I say, I've been here a few times and you'll probably recognise the composition when I set it up. But then towards the back of the woodland there's a path that goes through the woodland again to the other side of the woodland. And I'd like to go and capture another shot of the path at the other side of this woodland on the way out of here. So first of all I'll set this one up and then make my way over to the next one. Okay, so this scene behind me is really a typical Andrew Martin kind of shot, to be quite honest with you. You'll notice here behind me there is a path. It's not very obvious, but there is a path that runs through this little gap here through the trees. And this is where I wanted to come to photograph. I knew from a previous visit to this very spot that there was an image here that I wanted to capture, but at the time the lighting was never correct. And this is something I always have to think about before I go and take a shot anyway. So as I walk through this pathway, there is a perfect shot just here, and I'll show you that in just a moment when this person's walked past. Apologies for that there, folks. There was a guy walking past with walking his dog, so just had to wait for him to come through the scene before I can carry on. So as you'll see, there is a path through there, behind me just there, through the trees. Typical shot that I would take, to be quite honest with you. But I love the colours through there. I'm sure you can see those colours yourself as you look at the screen. But what I wanted to do, there's quite a lot of depth in this image, but also I don't know if you can tell either by what you can see going on around me or by what you can hear going on around me. There's quite a breeze blowing through this area, so it means that the leaves on the trees are never very still, so I have to try and think about that while I'm taking the shot. In order to stop that movement, I want quite a quick shutter speed. I've decided 1/15th of a second is perfect, but also there's a lot of depth in that image and I want to try and get as much of that in focus as I possibly can. So I'm shooting at f/16 rather than f4 because by using that smaller aperture I'm creating a slightly larger depth of field all the way through the image, so that gives me more of that image in focus that I wanted. The problem with f/16 in this light is it's not very light at all. And at 1/15th of a second, that's the very quickest shutter speed I could go to get this image, or sorry, the slowest shutter speed I could go to get this image without the leaves moving in the image as I'm taking the shot. So in order to get a decent shot of this, I had to increase my ISO to 1600 rather than 100. And it's very, very unusual for me to be increasing my ISO that high, even in the woodland, because I quite often tend to shoot with a very wide open aperture to make sure I get my initial subject in focus in the shot. But because of the depth here, I'm having to increase my depth of field, therefore I'm having to use a smaller aperture, and so a much higher ISO helps in this situation. I hope you like the image. That is going to be the last image of the day, I think. I'm just going to head off now and head home. If you have enjoyed this vlog, please remember to give it a thumbs up, and also please remember to subscribe to the channel. And while I remember, I've still got some of my 2024 woodland and landscape photography calendars available. If you're interested in buying one, please leave your email address and your name in the comments box below, and I'll get back in touch with you and explain how you can pay for that and get that delivered. In the meantime, I look forward to seeing you on another vlog very soon. Bye for now.